such is life and such is the situation.
Yes.
But let's look into this, because it seems like in the corner of all of this is Treasury and essentially what it is going or not going to do. We'll look into some of those details in just a bit. But Dennis is going to welcome you. He decided to go to Madagascar this week. And somebody was asking in the comments a little bit that what are the people of Madagascar called? They are the Malagasy.
Malagasy.
Yes.
Yeah. So we would like your interpretation of this one.
Yes. So the proverb goes like this: don't rely on the head, but also trust the mouth.
Wow.
Right?
How would you
Don't
interpret
trust.
that?
Don't
Only
rely
on the head,
Mm.
but the mouth as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think my understanding of that is, of course, we speak whatever our mind, what we put our minds to and our brains is what comes out. But I think probably what it says is that you can judge a lot of people by what they, by the way they speak and so, because you can't read somebody's mind all the time. But what you say can speak volumes about you, the way you. So that's probably what I think.
Yeah.
Yep. True. Opinions vary. Thank you for that. There are big numbers that are hitting us in the face, below, even as we get into this conversation. And beyond the numbers is also what would be the possible action in terms of what's going to be done about those things. And it's actually the story on the front page of the Standard today. Who would have thunk it? But the government is rolling out a controversial securitization model to fast-track infrastructure. We saw this with the stadium rollout. The number that we're looking at for that stadium is 44.7 billion shillings, and also the fuel levy of 175 billion. And essentially what is this supposed to do is that it's supposed to cover, in the meantime, the holes that are really gaping in terms of things that need to be done for infrastructure. Many are saying that it is a financial time bomb, borrowing against future taxes, that you don't know where this money is going to come from yet, but you've gone ahead to borrow with the hope and the faith that as you tax people into the future, then you'll be able to make do moving forward. It's being called reckless, it's being called opaque, and tantamount to mortgaging Kenya's future for short-term political optics. According to some, it's being called economic sabotage. And this is a Treasury insider who says this. You don't tax citizens today to gamble with their tomorrow. Experts are wondering in whose interests are government officials deploying these schemes. And while this is happening, Kenya's debt stands at 11.5 trillion shillings. And it has reached that it has gone up to that. I think the number that we're looking at was 34% in the last 2 years. Government use of taxes as collateral could essentially sink the country. That's what we're looking at. Is that true? Or is this just, normal things that would happen within the economic development cycles of a nation? Bilo?
Very well. Let me first let's look at the debt, the 11.5 trillion, which approximately 49% is domestic and the rest is external. When this administration came in, it was around 8.5 or so approximately. So it's gone up by about 2 trillion in the last 3 years or so. Is it likely to go up? It will, no doubt. And the numbers are very simple. It doesn't need rocket. It's not a rocket science. Look at what we are generating in terms of revenue. 2.5 trillion this year. The year just ended in July. Against what? An expected expenditure of 3.3 trillion. So there will be a budget deficit that will run into hundreds of billions, close to $1 trillion every year. That will be borrowed. The second thing, which is very important, is that out of the 2.5 trillion collected, how much are we actually spending annually to redeem existing loans and to service loans? It's this year is going to be 1.85 trillion. So what are we saying? You collect 2.5 trillion. You're going to pay 1.8 trillion to service existing loans. You are left with 700 billion. You have got public service whose wage bill is 700 billion. So if we want roads to be done, if we want other things to be done, to the country to run, the government to run activities, they have to borrow. That's the situation that I think we've been in. And it's not something that started today. I remember when 2022, you remember that's why the economy was the main issue in the campaigns, because even then we were arguing that 65 shillings out of every 100 shillings will actually go into servicing debt. It hasn't changed. Our debt to GDP has been, in fact, it went to 68, 69 in 2021 and so forth, now around 65 and a half, 66%. So it's not going to look good going forward also. Coming back to the securitization of the fuel levy and similar things. By the way, it's not the first time that these things are happening. But generally, if you look at the rest of the world, particularly the developed countries, people securitize everything. You can actually securitize this facility to go and get a loan. In your own house, you can securitize. You can take a loan against your fridge, against your furniture, against your everything. It happens in the rest of the world. This is the reason why you find the huge levels of personal and debts in many of these developed countries, is because all the land is securitized. In Africa, majority of our land is not. You cannot securitize because they're not title deeds. They're not properly. You cannot use them as security. But generally, the concept is that you can use anything that the lender is willing to accept to securitize your whatever. And you remember what happened in. I want to take a very good example of SGR. SGR was securitized against future revenues that will be generated. And I want to say this very clearly. Immediately that thing came up in 2016, government introduced a bill in Parliament on railway development levy, RDL. It's an act of Parliament actually that introduced it, and the idea was that it was going to generate revenues, which was at the time 1.5% of everything that gets imported, the total value of imports, and that will be used to repay the loans of the SGR. That kind of security is what the lender wanted to see. And it's against that kind of whatever that we got that 500 billion to do SGR.
So the loan was on projections of existing figures.
Yes. But although the government eventually collected a lot of money, something that I've raised several times, I think, even on TV, that look, today the railway development levy is around 2%. It has gone to one time even 2.5%. You're talking of 30-40 billion being collected annually. From 2016, it's gone more than twice the amount of loan that has been borrowed to do the SGR. But you see, when the government finds an opportunity to get some revenue, it will not stop that, because they are looking for every way in which they can to raise revenue. So I find it to be similar that they have the railway, they will have the fuel levy, which is also provided for in law, and so if the lender finds it. Everyone knows that servicing or sustainability of this debt is going to be difficult. The World Bank, everyone has been saying it. So I think getting new loans, given the current debt stress that the country is facing, would be difficult. So if you, however, are able to say, look, I'm borrowing against this inflow of revenue, specifically, I've got fuel levy, I'm going to generate this amount every month. It becomes very easy for the government then to get the lender to give them the money. So is it reckless? All borrowing is reckless if it's not going to be used for development. All borrowing. And we've had the government pledge time and again that every shilling that they're going to borrow, they're going to use it for development. It hasn't happened. Development has the lowest amount of absorption that you've seen in government expenditures. We are spending, we don't use more than 300-400 billion in a year.
So how can this continually happen in this manner? If what numbers are we looking at the moment? 11.5 trillion shillings. That's the amount that Kenya owes, and of course to different lending bodies, but that's cumulative. And we know that, again, constitutionally, that you borrow for development. But the audit paper tell us that the development absorption, like you said, is extremely low. So one has to ask the question, where do these funds go? Where have they gone? Would you not see I keep saying that if £1 billion shillings were to be put into a particular sector in the economy today, you would see it. You would feel the effect.
Yeah, but the money is going into consumption, and
Consumption
you know it.
of
The running of government, operational expenses.
But it's
and
legal.
You see it. I mean, look, it's simple. Your expenditure is 3.3 trillion, and you're collecting only 2.5. Out of that 2.5, you're spending 1.8 trillion to service loans and so forth. The balance is going to be going through salaries. Where are you going to get the money to run government?
So essentially, you're borrowing from
Of course,
Peter
it's
to pay
been
Paul.
from all the days. You remember when we were arguing on where did the $2 billion
Eurobond
Eurobond and they put it was one anything that I think it's clear that the government of Kenya is living beyond its means. It's not something that started today. It's been there. We've been saying it, and no leader who has come to power in the last many years has been able to rationalize public expenditure. That's where the trouble is. So we get into a situation where every year we allow consistently over expenditure, a budget deficit, which basically means we're spending more than we are on revenue. And it was, at one time, it went into almost 9% annually of budget deficit. Lately, they've been trying to reduce it to 4.5, but still, it's as long as it is a cumulative budget deficit which causes all this borrowing, because anytime you're spending more than you collect revenue, you have to.
So, Bilo, now you talk of a situation where, with the debt that the country finds itself in, and with advice from World Bank, the IMF saying it will be difficult for Kenya to get more debt. Now, paint a situation where now Kenya is unable to get debt, and we have to run government and services have to run. How would that look like? What does that mean if you're unable to get debt because of the situation we find ourselves in?
You see, two things will happen. One, if World Bank and IMF wants to give you money under those current circumstances, they'll bring in more conditionalities. More conditionalities will mean things will become more tough. There's something like a wage freeze, no further employment in public service. This condition and that condition would make it very difficult for government to do some of the things that we want them to do. The second thing that would happen is that the government has to introduce austerity measures. It's something that this government and the previous ones have not been able to do in this country. We've talked about it so many times. Look at how the misplaced priorities, look at the wasteful expenditure, look at how large government leaves. And we've said this is something that can be controlled. It happens in many other countries in Africa. People try to tighten their, and governments live very simply. And I've said
this is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. This month on Star Times, and the drama never lets up. Loyalty is tested in a war for power on gangs of Manila. When blood and truth collide, truth tests loyalty. Welcome to Sagrado. Watch Gigi's ruthless quest for justice in beautiful revenge. Experience the epic love story of Rama and Sita in Ramayan. Two sisters, one destiny. Together, they are unstoppable on Divya Drishti. Renew your subscription for 2 months on your current bouquet, and we'll upgrade you to the next high bouquet absolutely free for 2 months. Don't miss a single heartbeat. Stream all your favorite channels and shows on Star Times on Star Times. Enjoy digital life.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
I'm looking at this story, and the ongoing 44.7 billion bond issued to fund the construction of Talanta Sports Stadium. You talked about priorities. You're looking at fast-tracking road construction and clearing pending bills. What are the factors that are driving us to further debt? Is it, and this is not just this government alone, even previous governments, because with each incoming government, what we tend then to see from borrowing from the manifestos is either construction work, you've got mega projects. Is it a question of mismanagement? Is it just over borrowing for the sake of it, or is it structural challenges that we have with each regime that comes in?
You see, every regime that comes in wants to leave something, what they call, what Uhuru used to call legacy. Eventually, he came up with these legacy projects.
And I'm the one who constructed this.
I'm the one who did this. And there's no serious due diligence by the government really to to try and look at the return on those investments, because that is the key thing in any economy. If you are going to invest 500 billion into a project, what are the returns in terms of revenues that will flow, come in from, and in terms of the impact on the cost of living, in terms of the generally in the growth of the economy? What would be the impact? If there's no return, why would you want to invest? And some of those infrastructure projects, including SGR, remember, you people wrote about it a lot, the train to nowhere and so many things. Those things did not have any, we were told, it's not a short term, it's going to be long term. You will see it in the next 5 years. We have gone beyond 5 years and we don't see much return in terms of, I want to give you one example. One of the things we were told is that the cost of freight is going to come down, which is a major issue really in terms of the cost of production in this country, which affects our competitiveness in the region. But if you ask now the business community, they'll tell you there hasn't been much impact. I mean, many people still use the trucks because they're still cheaper than sometimes the SGR. So when you put all that kind of money, then you want to see what is the benefit. You want to put 44 billion into a stadium. What would be the return? What is the impact? What is the benefit? What are you going to do? What is going to change in terms of the So I think sometimes if we simply look at the legacy, if we want to simply be seen to have done something, and this is what drives the politics. This is what drives the political manifestos. And quite often politicians would argue that yes, this is what the people want. The youth are unemployed. We want to put up this kind of stadium so that we can, But does it translate into that? Eventually, stadiums are built and they'll be used once in a month. Sometimes not even once in a month. There are other logistics that will affect its utilization. There'll be operational costs. There'll be many other factors which determine whether or not that thing will be used. It can become a white elephant. We have a port in Lamu that cost hundreds of, tens of billions, which is like a white elephant. So I think some of these things. So these are political experiences which sometimes do not benefit really the economy, and this is unfortunately why we are where we are.
And is it possible? I'm just thinking because, like you're saying, so each regime that comes in, they have their manifestos, they have all these mega projects, but what it appears to me with what currently is going on is we can borrow as much as we can, provided that politically we look like we are the ones who did this, we did that. It is going to be the burden of the next government. It's almost like a don't care attitude. We don't care what's going to happen later, but for us, we want to make sure that we finish this within our timelines because it's politics, and then whoever comes in will carry the burden of figuring out then how do you structure debt repayment. Is that where we are? And if that is so, how? I'm just trying to think. Is it a legislative issue, or how then do we stop successive governments from doing this?
No, it's not legislative. You see, Parliament is a political institution, and members of Parliament would do if the majority is from the ruling party, they'll support what the ruling party does. It happens all over the world, and in governments, what they do is always kick the can down the road. It's not. I mean, the government will continue. The next government will pick it up from where you left it, and so, it's really about you must be seen to succeed as a government. You want to show that you are also running. You don't want to, you find it as a weakness to call it. Remember when this government came in, we said, why don't you call a national, economic conference? Let Kenyans put everything on the table. Tell Kenyans, this is what we have inherited. This is where we are. What can we do? And let people, it would look like you're weak, so you don't want to do that, but you want to seem to be doing something. And by the way, it's not just the government, but even the people who elected the government want to see some benefit in their regions. They want to see roads constructed. They want to see this. So when the president, or when they visit him or he visits, everyone has a wish list. And if you cannot do it, then you are a failure, you are a liar, you are this, you are that. So you want to be seen to be doing something, so you promise, even when you can't deliver. And I think that is unfortunately. So I think the fact remains we are a developing country. We rely on taxes. We don't have any other source of revenue for this government. I think the sooner the government really, puts Kenyans on notice that, look, this is what we are collecting. And this is what we can spend. We cannot borrow anymore.
Okay. Let me ask you.
Unless we
Yeah.
do that, I think we'll continue digging this hole.
We're going to go to a break in a few, but just two rapid questions here, and then let's do the calculation, shall we? What is the current recurrent expenditure for Kenya? Do we know?
Wow, it was 2 point. I think it's almost 2.7 trillion last time.
2.7 trillion.
Out of the 3.3 to nearly 2.7 trillion is recurrent, but then it gets spread into various arms of the government, judiciary, parliament, counties,
It's across
and all
the board.
that across the board. Yeah.
So looking at a 3.3 trillion shilling budget, of that 2.7 trillion shillings is recurrent expenditure. So what KRA will collect in a good year? I think the best in the most
The best
recent
was this year, yeah.
was this
2.5,
year
yeah.
with 2.5. So you're almost bang on recurrent expenditure in terms of what taxes then should collect. So taxes can actually pay for recurrent expenditure. They can, if you give or take. But are we still saying that recurrent expenditure is still too high at more than 90%, almost 90% of your total budget will go towards recurrent expenditure? Is that too high?
No, by law, it should at least 30%. The PFM Act requires minimum of 30% should go to development, which means your current expenditure should not exceed 70%. That's the way the law is. It shouldn't exceed 70%. But it does. It's happening in the counties. It's happening in the national government. It's exceeding. All of them exceed that limit. But I think before you say that, look, whatever we collect 2.5 trillion can cover recurrent expenditure if the government wants to be, at least squeeze in. But that is not the way it's looked at. The recurrent, there is a debt which is preferential. So anything you collect first, you have to service the debt. And the debt takes 1.8 trillion.
We're going to have to look into... I mean, it puts you in a bit of a tailspin.
Yes.
It gives you a bit of a cold headache. But we're going to have to then look into odious debt and ask the difficult question about if we know that 11.5 trillion shillings over the last 10 years has not gone into development, which is what it is supposed to do when you borrow money. We know you borrow for development. That's what the law says. Or you make up a budget deficit in the short term, and I don't know if it was 90 days or something, that you can borrow to make up what you can't with a budget, but not beyond 90 days. If that has happened, then does Kenya really owe? And when I say Kenya, the people of Kenya, do they really owe this money for the future? We'll come back and look into that because it's a serious one, and whether odious debt is a thing and whether Kenyans should be accepting of this. In the meantime, you want to borrow? You might want to think about the Loop app. So sometimes something comes to you and you want to ask yourself the question, okay, so there's a good deal. Dennis has come back from Garissa. He said, we can do this thing, guys. Get your own, is it fleet? It's not fleet. Camel, carriage.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start day.
You can't see it. So does Kenya owe this money?
Well, I think alone, let me give you, you can compare it to what happens in a bank. When the bank lends you money, there are, policies of the bank on how you can borrow, who is authorized to give the loan, what are your securities and so forth. So if the loan has been properly executed, within the requirements of the bank, then you're bound by that terms of that bank, whatever happens. The same thing with the government. If the loan has been properly executed by Treasury, which has got the powers under the PFM Act of the Constitution, and it has been, the same has been then submitted to Parliament, and Parliament has ratified it. In terms of the legality, it becomes very difficult to challenge that legality because any national government loan, the ultimate authority that ratifies it for its legality is Parliament. And Parliament does that through the budget, approval of the budget in the estimates, because all of them are listed there, all the loans, from which country, for what amount, and everything gets approved. So, and that's what the Constitution requires, that any borrowing by the government should be approved by Parliament. And so in that case, it becomes difficult if you say that, since the money has not been used for the purpose for which it was borrowed, then we are not bound by it and we cannot pay it. No, that I think for a nation it would be difficult to solve. But what can be done? What can be done is that someone can be held responsible. Parliament. That's where our weakness. Our weakness in all this thing actually ultimately is Parliament, and Parliament is politics. But that is where the weakness is, because Parliament can say, sorry, you have borrowed this amount of money, yes, but you have not used it for development. You can't borrow it. You cancel that loan. We are not ratifying it. We are not approving it. We cannot just give you money for budget support and so forth. But Parliament is politics, and they will do what the executive wants, and that's what happens. In the other day, you saw that big, beautiful bill of Trump, which was creating huge debt, and so he managed to get it through because his members of his party were supporting him. Although they knew that this was going to create a huge budget deficit, already 3-point-something trillion US. But this is what politics is, and unfortunately that's what happens also in our parliament. You remember even under Uhuru, how many times we changed the limit, the debt ceiling. They kept changing this year, and then next year they kept increasing again. I kept saying, no, you guys.
You can't keep
and
doing
they kept increasing because the boss wants, the parliament, the government wants it. So that unfortunately is what we are in, where the political expediency of the day is what the government seems to be looking at, and not the burden. And if you look at our constitution, it's very clear. The principles for taxation, one of them is that it should not burden the future generations. It's very clear in the constitution. So to the extent that you're actually doing that, you're burdening the future society with all this debt, it's not right. It contravenes the principles or the spirit of the Constitution very clearly.
Now, there have been talks around odious debt, and there have been calls that Kenya should not pay these and should just default altogether because it is money that was borrowed and was not used for the intended purpose. Therefore, default, don't pay. Let's find a way of those responsible to pay this money. What would that do to the economy? Because it is a conversation that is out there.
No, if you default on a sovereign loan, say a loan from China, a loan from IMF, World Bank, US, the consequences will be very severe for the country because, one, you will not be able to access any further loans anywhere else. I think that the message will go out that this country has defaulted on a loan, and the consequences will be very big, really, in terms of your entire, not just on loans, but I think even in your payment, global payment transactions can be impacted. It can also, affect your rating for investments and so forth, done normally by those Western, it was US companies like Fitch and so forth, and Moody. So it has significant impact on the economy. Can we do it? Can we say, no, we are not going to? Are there odious debts? They are, by the way. That I think nobody can rule out. And what it means is that there are certain loans which have been granted by government, but which may have been used for private purposes. And it happens quite often. And I want to again, let me just use an example of, for example, SGR.
Yes.
When SGR was being started, we were told it's going to cost 65 billion shillings. But by the time it was complete, we were told it's 100 billion. And then we were told this is, a PPP is not a government which is doing it, it's a private. So then later we were told, the government has put in some loan of 25 billion. It was in the media. So then if this is seen as a PPP, and why does the government have to put in, or guarantee a 25 billion?
Yes.
So that kind of, government granting some loans or some loans being taken out for some private activity is there in the history of this country. It's something that has happened from 60s up to now. So, and I think those are the ones which, if you can identify, you can say this is a bad loan and we can't service it. But, you can't service it as who? If it is the government of Kenya, then you get in trouble as the government of Kenya, and then the impact will be on the entire, and every one of us will pay the price for that default.
But can you renegotiate? I'm just looking at some statistics here, and you're looking at precedents of countries that have dealt with this odious debt question, or rather refusing the odious debt. Iraq in 2003, after Saddam Hussein's regime fell, so the US argued that much of Iraq's debt was odious. Then you have Ecuador in 2008. the president, Rafael Correa, refused to repay certain bonds after an audit declared that that they were illegitimate. Argentina and Iceland, the other countries similarly that challenged or renegotiated. So there are cases and precedents that we've had from some of these countries. Then, in that case, is it possible, because much of our debt is tied to international finance institutions, then to renegotiate and say we won't pay what was stipulated initially, but this is what we are willing then to pay?
You see, we have tried this. By the way, let me just take you back in history. We have tried this during the Anglo leasing. In Anglo leasing, you remember up to 65 billion borrowed in 18 projects by the government, which was brought to Parliament, and we found that these loans were not actually used for the purposes for which they were intended, or they were not even, sometimes they were not even used. The money just disappeared up the Anglo leasing cases. You remember that? And the government said we ruled in Parliament that it must be cancelled. The government must cancel those contracts. And the government did cancel some of the contracts. But what happened? They went to court. And years later, one of them, I think, remember, about $1 billion was paid in the last 2 or 3 years of Uhuru's administration, because they had no choice. They were told, look, this is the ruling of the International Court, you have to pay. So you can do that. We have cancelled some of those things, but they'll end up in a court. And it's not like you will get away with it. At some stage, you might be lucky if there's actually audience and there's no documentation. It has not been properly or legally executed by the government of Kenya in accordance with the law. Then you can. But where this thing, that's why I said, where the loans have been properly executed by the government of Kenya in accordance with the law, it doesn't matter for the purpose for which they have been used. That's up to the government of Kenya and its people. But you must pay it. I don't think you can escape it.
But I'm just thinking, then it seems Kenyans are then held hostage if a government decides that they're going to use taxes as collateral. And if then we continue with this odious debt, can then be a recourse where we look, hey, so when you're borrowing this loan, by the way, before money is released, are you then giving documents of the projects that you're going to undertake when you're getting this money?
That's
so then, in doing an audit, can we then say we look at what all these projects were consuming, we look at the monies, whether they were completed or not, and argue out a case and say, and I don't know which institution will arbitrate this, and argue and say, as a country, we're coming in and saying, this is how much was borrowed. This is the odious debt. These are the documentations for Project A. This is what in the papers was said this project was going to consume, but this is the reality. This is how much was used, but we don't know where these other monies are, or we track where these other monies are in offshore accounts. Can a case be argued?
Yes.
According to
now you're talking sense. Now we are talking sense. You see, where the money has not, there is one thing to properly execute a loan facility, but it's another to confirm that the money actually has been received by the government of Kenya. And that is where you remember that audit by the OCO on the Eurobond, and he wanted to go to the US and see to the Federal Reserve and see whether actually that money has come to Kenya, because he could not get documents to verify, to confirm that the money has actually come into the consolidated fund. So that, yes, if you know, and those are the kind of loans, the one you were reading about Iraq, and those are the kind of loans, the government signs on, but the money is paid into some accounts in abroad. The money does not come into the country. Those kind of situations, yes, you can. That one can be challenged. Yes, we signed on to $1 billion loan, but we didn't receive it. It was paid into some accounts offshore, into somebody else. We're not going to pay for it. That one, yes, we have a ground. That one you can receive. But where the money has been received by the government of Kenya, whether it has been used for salaries or not, I think that one, there's no two ways about it. It's a liability that you have to pay.
So, Bilo, if you look at how loans are issued to even individuals, say, I'm borrowing this much to construct a house, and a bank would give you this money in bunches upon the progress of this development as we proceed. Is that the case when we talk about money being given to Kenya, say, to construct SGR? It is based on the progress and that the work is actually being done, or this money is just given to Kenya in the consolidated fund, go do the project?
There are two different types of loans here. The loans that you get from IMF, for example, or World Bank, it always comes in tranches, and it's tied to conditionalities, and it or any other bank, AFDB, and all of this, they would look at the progress of the project, and it's released in tranches based on the level of, just like the private ones. But our challenge, let me tell you, the one that started during the time of Anglo-Lucian, which is still happening today, and is this kind of loans where you are the supplier and the financier at the same time. We had ruled in Parliament that should never happen again when Anglo-Lucian happened. What happens is that SGR, a Chinese company, is contracted. They are the ones who are going to get their finance. They are the ones who are the contractors to build. That kind of a situation is the one that creates some of these, loans that we are calling odious, or loans that are very, that cannot be verified, because they will determine how much it's going to be. They designed the project, by the way, in SGR, for example. They designed the project. They then determined how much it will cost. And they went ahead and took the loan, from the Chinese Exim Bank or whatever. And so that kind of a situation we said in Parliament, because what happened in Anglo-Lucian, where everything was inflated. Everything was overpriced, because you will supply this bottle of water, you are the supplier, you are the financier, you will say 1,000 shillings. Yeah. This is what happened. And this is why we said that kind of a loan is dangerous and we should not accept. One, because of the very simple fact that we are going to overprice and inflate, the value of the contract. Okay. And I think this is the kind that you're seeing lump sums. So, you're given a contract of 100 billion, then you're the one who determines what you're doing, and that's it.
So is it possible for economic development to happen staring in the face of these exorbitant loans that are due? Because in this middle section here, there is constant complaint about government programs that must be funded, whether you like it or not. Whether we're talking about health that we've been touting about forever, whether we talk about education, infrastructure that's necessary, when you talk about agriculture and all these fantastic programs that are being put in, but then there are farmers who are locked out from the market because the road from farm to market doesn't exist. That's the reality of the situation. So is it possible to attain economic development in the face of these exorbitant loans, and with the knowledge that payment of them is being done at the expense of development? Is it possible?
There's no country, and that has been repeated many times by even the lenders themselves, from Margaret Thatcher and all of the people who have been lending, that there's no country that has grown through aid or loans. No country has developed. You cannot develop through that. And let me tell you, there's no such thing as a loan. You know what happens is, it's simply your tax. What is a loan? You're going to pay it. So it's your tax. At the end of the day, that everything is about your tax. So unless we deal with how that tax or that loan or that funding is utilized, we cannot achieve that economic development. And the question we have in Kenya really is not about our inability to raise taxes. We raise more tax, and I keep repeating this, more than all the East African countries combined. But our issue is how to spend it. And that's where the challenge has been in every government. That promise we are giving, that we are going to have austerity, we are going to deal with corruption, we are going to deal with wastage, with inefficiencies and misplaced priority. Nothing. It's the same story, and that's where our money is. Otherwise, I think there's no doubt in my mind, and we saw it during the time of I think either the first or second term of Kibaki, we reduced our borrowing significantly. And we were almost, about less than 10% of our budget was funded by donors or by loans. So it's possible to have economic development, but not through loans, not through aid. No, you can't. That would be a long shot.
We talked about 11 trillion shillings, and if you just do your math and just look at what that looks like, we talk about the expressway did cost Kenya around 88 billion. Now, if you divide that, that means you would have 125 expressways constructed in the country. But that is not what we're seeing today. Now, here is a question where, with all these in mind and the laws that you passed in Parliament, that makes it difficult, that makes it impossible for one to be the supplier, the implementer of this project, and also the person who's giving you the loan. Why does it seem as though that is one critical law that is being overlooked when you're going to get these loans?
First, let me correct you. Don't look at 11 trillion. Look at a larger figure. The 10 years of Uhuru, I've written on this several times. The total amount of revenue that was collected by that government was 25 trillion. This guy has now collected in the 3 years, if you average 2.5 trillion, so you're talking of about 30, over 30 in the last decade or so. Over 30 trillion has been raised through taxes by Kenyans. Forget about the loans. So that alone, if our government was spending the money, properly, you would see the impact, like you said. Yes. I mean, you will see so many of those SGRs and so forth. But we've just said that 80-90% of this money ends up in consumption in government. So we are not getting value for our money. That's the challenge we have in this country. That unless we have a government that says no, you cannot spend more than 60-70% of our money on and we must rationalize. But it's something that is a decision that needs to be made by all Kenyans. Let me be frank with you. The moment you say, okay, we're going to retrench 1 million people, reduce the budget deficit, no one will accept. The moment you say, okay, there'll be no, we cut down on this or cut down, there'll be so many other. Let me tell you, even the media, by the way, let me just give you a simple example. When the president came in, Ruto came in 2023, and he said, we're going to reduce the expenditure by 300 billion. You remember?
Yes.
And one of these major medias, they said, that's going to impact on the economy, because it means if the government is not going to spend, it's going to impact on the economy. In other words, government is a major player in the economy. So if the government is not spending, so then it will also. So there are a lot of other things that we have to. That's why I'm saying some of these decisions, governments might take and they'll become very unpopular. But I think unless we look at the larger picture, we are paying a lot of money. Government is collecting a lot of revenue, but we are not really getting the benefit of it. That's the bottom line.
Is Parliament our problem when it comes to borrowing?
No, Parliament is Parliament, I've told you, the political parties support the executive. I mean, wherever they are, you can't do much. They will go by what they are, executive. But it's possible for Parliament, if they really are concerned, they can tell the government, no, we can't do this. We're part of the executive, we're part of the same political party, but we can't do this. This is not good. And we saw it in the 2024 finance bill. They went ahead with the government, and later when Kenyans went to the streets, everyone said, sorry, we were wrong. So, I mean, they can say so. They can tell the government. And you remember when in the midnight, they were in State House and saying, okay, we have all agreed now, we're not going to approve that bill. So, I mean, they can, Parliament, they can tell the executive that, look, we're in the same party, but we can't do this. This is going to hurt.
Our time's running out, below. We've got about a minute to go. But then this question so we've looked at prescriptive ways in which this should actually be handled, in terms of what you must do to stop the bleed, in terms of what you must do to be able to turn things around. It's very clear. It's been done by nations before. It can happen. But what are we looking at if it doesn't?
If it doesn't, what we are looking at is more loans. Every single trip the president goes, or some treasury official travels, they'll be signing on to something new. Because they'll go with a wish list. I have a road. I have this project and that project. And let me tell you, there's a lot of money out there for lending. So much money. Even inside here, for all these banks, international banks will lend. So they'll be borrowing more and more. That I have no doubt in my mind. Yes, if nothing is done, the loan, in 2 years, it's 2 trillion. The remaining couple of years, again, probably another 1 or 2 trillion minimum. So the loans will keep going up. And me and you will continue paying for it. And the generations that will come. I don't think there's any two ways about it. They will continue borrowing. I don't see any appetite for reduction of expenditures or for dealing with the elephant in the room, corruption and wastage and inefficiency. No one seems to be ready to deal with that.
It's a grim picture you paint, but somebody's got to apply the right brush strokes, that's for sure. Bill Okero, political economist, thank you for being here this morning and for opening up this conversation. Necessary for us to have, for people to be in the know in terms of how deep in the water. And let's see in the next couple of days. Thank you for being here this morning. I appreciate that much. Continue with the conversation. It's 8 a.m.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.